Sustainability means acting today for a healthier tomorrow. At IHH Healthcare, sustainability is about going above and beyond. Beyond the Hippocratic Oath principle of doing no harm to care for good. Building a sustainable world by caring for our patients, our people, our communities, and our planet. We empower our patients to lead healthier lives through safe and quality care, along with digital solutions for greater convenience and transparency. We inspire our people by championing their total well-being, development, and inclusion. We give back to our communities by harnessing our strong medical expertise to tackle antimicrobial resistance, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases. We protect our only home, our planet, focusing first on reducing our carbon footprint and waste. Join us as we take action today towards a healthier tomorrow for generations to come.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here today for this new installment of our IHH HealthcareInsider series. As you know, we come together every couple of months and discuss interesting topics surrounding the healthcare industry. We had a first discussion around COVID-19 vaccines. We talked about digital health, about laboratories. We talked about healthcare mega trends in our last installment. Today, I am here on the panel with distinguished guests to talk about sustainability and ESG trends and activities in our markets in the healthcare space, but also here in Malaysia. And I want to introduce the guests we have today. We have Dr. Kelvin Loh, the CEO of IHH with us today. We have Dr. Ken Yeoh, and Ken, you are the Senior Vice President and Head of Corporate Governance and Sustainability for Bursa Malaysia. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have Muassam Mohamad, the Head of Investment Stewardship of PNB here in Malaysia, one of our largest investors in IHH. I think you have currently around 10-ish%, I think, in IHH. So welcome on this panel. Today we talk about sustainability, and I guess if you would have started to discuss this topic 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was very excited and you got a lot of credit and a lot of positive resonance in discussing sustainability and the environment and social topics. Now, I think the discussion has shifted. This has become a lot more a hygiene factor for corporates, hygiene factors for whole countries to discuss. I think this week people meet for COP27 to discuss the latest trends and the latest actions. And we will follow this, what the outcomes are. And I think it does drive a lot of change for management, for companies, for our strategies. And even we, IHH, we've issued our renewed sustainability strategy with 4 Ps, and we'll hear a little bit later from Kelvin about that. Now, of course, the question is also for a company like IHH, and we are one of the top publicly listed companies here in Malaysia. What does this mean for us? What does it mean for our relationship and discussion with investors? And we want to talk about this a little bit. We are here today from Pantai Hospital, KL. And as you can see here on the table and everywhere, this is already a completely non-virgin plastic hospital for non-clinical applications. And I think if I recall Jean-François, our country CEO, he has a plan to roll this out to the whole country, and he's even stimulated his neighbors in Singapore and in India to think about strategies to convert their hospitals into non-plastic hospitals. Now, let's kickstart with one question to the panel. And I want to introduce or invite or thank you for coming here to this panel. The first time we have actually live guests. We have a lot of guests online. This is the first time we have live guests here in the room. And I want to introduce all of you for the first poll session that will give us a little bit of an introduction into our discussion. And the question for the poll, you have QR codes, I think, for those who are here in the room and for those who participate online. The question is, who do you think has the biggest impact in driving sustainability in our world? Is it companies? Is it the regulator? Is it investors, individuals, us as individuals? Is it NGOs? Please add in your questions, and we'll use this for the discussion. Maybe as a reminder for everyone, there's a question box. You can type in your questions that we're going to ask throughout the, respond to throughout the event. And I think we have the first responses already. So 25% of the audience believes it is companies, corporates, who are the most important drivers for sustainability. Half of the respondents, 47%, 49% now, believe it's the regulators that need to lead the way, governments that need to set direction in sustainability. 20% believe, 19% believe it's investors and markets, and only 5% believe it's actually the NGOs that drive sustainability. It's a very, very interesting view. Governments, the companies and corporates themselves, and investors who vote with their investments and their choices. Now, maybe I jump right in and ask Kelvin on launching this IHH sustainability targets. What are the key actions and what are the key themes to jump on this bandwagon and make this a hygiene factor also for IHH?
Sustainability is a buzzword, but I think in reality for IHH, it's not new. It has to be core and central to our business. We had established our vision to be the world's most trusted healthcare services network. That really meant putting our patients first and foremost in the center. But of course, the realization also is that being the world's most trusted healthcare services network really means that we have to create a better healthcare system, a healthcare system that not only takes care of patients in the now, but also make sure that that healthcare can be sustained for future generations, right? So yes, we launched our sustainability manifesto, or you can call it our tagline. It says, care for good. And what that really means is that we double down in making sure that care in healthcare will come true to our stakeholders, that is the patients, our people, the public, and the planet. Because it is only by making sure that we actually do that, that healthcare becomes, that our business becomes sustainable. We are in a funny place because on the one hand, there isn't a shortage of demand, right, for healthcare. Healthcare demand will keep growing. The number of people aged above 65, that is the elderly, will double in the next 30 years across the world from about 800 million to 1.6 billion. That population in turn need about 3 times hospitalization compared to people below 65. So then we are talking about 6x now demand of what it is today, which means that, yes, our business will grow, but at the same time, it's also a crisis of our generation. It is a social crisis, it is an economic crisis, maybe even a political crisis that's looming. Because if we do not find ways to deliver healthcare better, make it more sustainable, then that crisis affects our business as well. So, answer to your question, the core theme for us is that we need to make healthcare better, deliver care for good to our stakeholders so that it is sustainable for our stakeholders and also for our business.
It's interesting because you're taking a real focus point on the healthcare industry itself and what does healthcare do to support sustainability. Of course, there are environmental targets, there are social targets, but you overweight on what does healthcare do. Now, in the video earlier on, we heard about AMR entry. Share a little bit more about that.
So our sustainability journey, I think, has to cover many aspects. It's cover the environmental aspects for sure. That's why we have initiatives to take care of the planet, our only planet. We have to take care, a big piece of it will come under our social sustainability and of course governance aspects as well. But yes, in looking after the public is where many of our social commitments come in. And the topic that you bring up actually is yet another one of those big sustainability issues in healthcare, which is antimicrobial resistance. What is that? That basically is pathogen mutation, right? Mutation of fungus, bacteria, due to mankind's use of antimicrobial or antibiotics. So the inappropriate use, the rampant use, which is not in a controlled scientific fashion, has over years now led to these pathogens mutating into superbugs, which means that they then become very hard to treat. Currently, there are bugs which are resistant to most, if not all, of the antibiotics known to mankind, caused by the food and healthcare industry itself. In fact, there was an estimate that in 2019, 5 million deaths were caused by these superbugs. And that, in my mind, is a hidden pandemic. That is a pandemic larger than COVID-19 because even at the top of estimates in 2020, it was said that COVID-19 killed 3 million people. So we have to take global leadership in this topic. For us as a leading healthcare provider, we have to make sure we find ways to treat our patients, at the same time do no harm, make sure that we can reduce the burden of antimicrobial resistance, or at least retard that progression and tackle this big hidden pandemic, which actually is one of the big sustainability issues in healthcare and indeed for society.
And I'm sure this is a not easy topic because the antibiotics are prescribed by individual doctors. So you have a lot of interface and a lot of convincing to do to drive that strategy.
Yes, absolutely.
Look, you are a 330 billion portfolio topic, ringgit. That's what you shared earlier with us. You have that's a fairly large investment company, and you've issued your new sustainability framework in April 2022.
Yes.
Share us a little about it. What are your targets? What are you doing? How do you deploy your money to help this direction?
Yep. Thank you, York. Yep. So in April, we launched our sustainability framework, underlining our commitments towards sustainability. So during that launch, we announced our 10 big commitments. So within the environmental space, our main principle is to enable the transition to green economy. So this is where we set out 3 environmental targets. Number 1, to be a net zero company by 2025, to have a net zero portfolio by 2050, and then to invest 10 billion in green and transition assets. Within the social space, we want to promote inclusiveness and equity. So this is where, as a company, we want to launch our labor rights policy by the end of this year. By next year, to have a living wage policy within the organization. And then number 3, to have 40% women in leadership within the organization by 2025. And number 4, to balance profitability with social investments. And then within the governance side, we advocate best practices in terms of governance. So we have 3 core items or commitments there. Number 1 is to have a triple bottom line stewardship model. Similar to yours, we have 3 Ps as well, which is focuses on people, profitability, and planet. And then on the voting side, we push for transparency in terms of voting. This is where we publish our proxy voting ahead of time. And then number 3 is to have a TCFD aligned disclosure, which we'll share soon in the future. So these are the 10 targets that we have set. And right now we are busy talking to our investing companies like IHH and also all of the other companies that we invest in to push for a strong decarbonization plan and as well as to embrace the importance of sustainability across.
It's an interesting one because especially your last one on the voting and how you are voting in our AGMs. I actually saw your advices to us as management to say, look, we will vote for and against this and this and this. And you gave us detailed reasons why you are voting like that. And with that, of course, you're influencing management to have certain direction. But let me confirm your targets. 2025, net zero as a company. 2050, net zero in your 330 billion investment portfolio.
Yeah.
And you want to invest 10 billion ringgit in sustainability projects over that period of time.
Yep.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And so that means we're one of your portfolio companies. What does that mean for us?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, obviously, we have these sizable investments prior to launching our sustainability commitments. So as a whole, what we aim to do is to engage and advocate among our investing companies on the importance of sustainability. And what we see is that companies are in different stages of the journey. We have companies who are more advanced than others, but more over than not, we want to have companies with decarbonization plans to embrace the importance of net zero, and particularly because as the world gradually decarbonizes, I think there's a lot of things that will change in terms of consumer tastes, demands, shareholder preferences, and whatnot. So we want to play our role as an institutional investor, and then that's what we're doing at the moment.
So will you stop? Sorry, Kelvin.
So I was going to say to Muazzam that you'll be happy to note that by 2050, we should still be able to be part of your portfolio, because we have the same goal to achieve net zero by 2050. But that goal is not just a throwaway line by 2050, right? And we also have interim goals where we have said that for IHH by 2025, we bring our carbon emissions back to where it is in 2022, and we expect then to consistently bring it down after that. Now, as a growth company, what that means is that, let's say we have 6-7% volume growth every year. That means we have 20% increase in business activity, but yet we have to bring that carbon back to where it is today.
Yep.
That means we have to have a 20% reduction in the next 3 years.
Yep.
And by 2050, hopefully, we'll still be part of your portfolio.
So let's move to the regulator, and we've discussed this before a little bit. Look, the regulator is about compliance, about rules, and that's what you did, right? You rolled out several enhancements in your sustainability reporting framework, and that leads, of course, to a lot of reporting and a lot of new things companies who are listed with you need to comply to. So what were the underlying reasons that you did that? Why did you do that? And what are the benefits for us?
Thanks, Jock. It is fascinating hearing the conversation between Kelvin and Muazzam. because the role of the exchange is to be facilitative. It is exactly to trigger these sorts of engagements and conversations. So if we go back half a decade, the sustainability ecosystem was really nascent in Malaysia. And what was the catalyst that compelled all the PLCs to embark on the sustainability journey in the first place? Bursa's launch of its original sustainability reporting framework. So for the benefit of the audience, all PLCs are required to produce a sustainability statement within their annual reports to detail how they manage material sustainability issues, all of the risks and opportunities. So the conversation has moved on quite a bit since then, and it is now so detailed and complex. Yeah? So our framework started very flexible because most of the PLCs were still doing CSR back then rather than sustainability proper. But it is time now to bring the conversation to the next level because the expectations of key stakeholders such as PNB and all that have really skyrocketed in recent years. So our facilitative role now is to bring all of our PLCs to the next level. It is quite interesting because when you talk about a regulator, you will always hear the term compliance. But for us, it is much more than that. It is about future-proofing our PLCs. Now, we recognize the fact that good ESG practices requires both effort and resources to be put in the short term. But in the longer term, this is what drives value creation. Think about this. More efficient use of resources, better business processes, stronger stakeholder relationships. All of this will enhance the resilience of the business. Not only that, from the perspective of the exchange, we are preparing all of our PLCs and for them to be well placed to deal with what's to come. Let me give you an example. Within the space of the Central Bank of Malaysia, there is a strong push to mandate climate-related disclosures amongst Malaysian FIs by the end of 2024. So Malaysian financial institutions are the banks, insurers, and asset managers. Come then, be it SME or PLCs, they will be asking ESG-related data from their clients. So our PLCs have to be prepared. And more than that, most of the financial institutions will start taking ESG considerations in their decision making. So to secure access to funds in the future, you have to have good ESG practices in place. Then you have got the wider piece, which is, for example, the European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism. It's coming to hit us. We are a trading nation, and they are saying carbon taxed. And any carbon-intensive activities, you're going to be taxed for that. So if you don't decarbonize, you'll be at a competitive disadvantage. So all of these come together, and we see it from a competitive viewpoint. So a recent study by McKinsey, they scrutinized more than 2,000 studies and concluded that better ESG scores actually equates to 10% lower cost of capital. So ladies and gentlemen, ESG is not really just about compliance and window dressing, but it is a strategic imperative. So this is how the exchange is seeing it.
Yep. It's a very interesting theme that you're bringing up here, because what you say is sustainability drives competitiveness, and it even drives your financial performance because it reduces cost, in this case, cost of capital. Are your PLCs, are we who are listed at your stock exchange, are we equipped to do that? Do we have the right skill set? What is your assessment?
Our assessment is yes and no, in the sense that, please remember, we are setting a new minimum baseline for all PLCs to conform to, because we are mandating a set of disclosures, for example, common themes and indicators. Those themes that should be material across all PLCs regardless of size or sector. anti-corruption, climate change, water use, emissions management, these sorts, right? So what we aim to do is to come up with a regime that actually satisfies the informational needs of the actual stakeholders of the PLCs. We can tell you very honestly that most of the more advanced practitioners and reporters are already reporting way beyond what we require. So that is an affirmative yes, a resounding yes. And then there are others who actually in our extensive stakeholder engagement is saying that it is desirable to report, and given enough time, we would report in the future. So the intention is already there. But you have got the rest of the smaller PLCs who require a bit more time and support. So this is what we are doing: advocacy, extensive or comprehensive disclosure guides and toolkits. And there is also a staggered implementation timeframe. So all of the enhancements that we're rolling out is coming into force 31st December 2023, 2024, and 2025, reporting in the subsequent years. So we feel that this is the right balance for our market. So yes, they will be ready in time for implementation.
And of course, you're expecting large companies like IHH to be a leader in this and probably help you in this journey.
For sure, because we have got other major initiatives that we've rolled out. For example, our PLC transformation program. So the idea, York, is exactly that: to get all of the big boys and all of the more progressive ones to come together as a community of practice, to learn from one another and to improve collectively.
Super refreshing to see the representative of a regulator talk about competitiveness, future-proofing, and resilience. I think that's really new and very, very welcome. Let's go back to the poll and maybe ask a second question to the audience. And again, we have a QR code for those of you who are here in the audience. And for those who are online, I'm sure there's a QR code. And the question is, which aspect of ESG do you think poses the biggest risk to the business? Is it environmental, climate change, or energy crisis? It's social, like civil unrest, human rights crisis, or is it governance, fraud, embezzlement, conflicts? What are the key risks? And it's interesting, as the topics are growing here, as the distribution comes in, we see it's rather equally distributed, interestingly. So the audience does believe, and we have now 70 people who have submitted their vote. So there is a belief in the audience that it is more or less an equal share, maybe with a little bit more overweight of environmental and social, a little bit less on governance, maybe because we've made a lot of progress on governance in the last years already, that could be connected to it. So let's take this and move to the next section, where we talk a little bit, how does this work specifically? And maybe, Muazzam, I come back to you as one of the largest investors in Malaysia. How do you balance these goals that you have around profitability, financial goals, with sustainability goals? Isn't it like counterintuitive that those are going together? I mean, it costs more money. You said yourself you want to invest 10 billion. You will stop investing in so-called brown companies that may be very profitable. How do you balance this?
I think the contrast is that, if you think about the last decade or so, everything was probably more return-centric. Everybody was chasing profitability. And what we've seen so far as an institutional investor or fund manager is that the impact of climate change, social instability, governance issues has a deep impact on the performance of companies. So which is why I think going forward, if you think about the next decade, 2 decades, I think the ESG matters that we see today will shape how companies will perform in the near future. So I think, yes, I think there is an element of investments required by corporate Malaysia in terms of embracing ESG. But I think in the long run, that's exactly what is needed in order to be resilient, to adapt to the effects of climate change, and also to avoid from missing the boat, so to speak. Because I think companies need to think about their business model going forward. Is it still relevant in a low carbon world, for instance? So I think mathematically, it does seem like it requires some form of investments by the companies themselves. But we think that in the long run, it's not just about value preservation, but if they do it right, it's about value creation as well. So in terms of investments, for example, I think we've read a lot of literature saying that in order to reach 1.5 Celsius annually, we need investments around the region of 3.5 trillion to 4 trillion globally, right? So I think if companies manage to capture this opportunity, this is where I think value creation can be done. Not just about preserving value, but to also create value and to perform better in the long run.
Do you have, as a company, something like a portfolio index on your invested companies where you say, well, I am actually tracking that the sustainability direction of all these companies is really moving towards your 2025 and your 2050 targets?
Yep. So PNB as an organization, we are still early in this journey. So we've just launched it in April. But you're absolutely right. So right now we're doing our baselining in terms of how our scope 1, 2, and 3. So our investments is obviously finance emission in scope 3. We're going to develop our pathway to net zero. And of course, I think as we do this exercise, we will have a clearer picture of where the companies are and what's the pathway that these companies should be on. And as we speak, we already track to a certain extent, providing data thanks to the likes of Bursa, which has been pushing in terms of more clarity or transparency in terms of the companies. So that has helped a lot in terms of identifying what are the material issues when it comes to ESG for a particular company or industry.
So is it okay for you? I mean, you said it's going to be an upfront investment. So if we cut our dividends by 10%, that's fine. In order to reinvest that in sustainability, that's okay for you.
I wouldn't say. I'm not going to. Okay, dividends. Of course, I think at the end of the day, each company or each shareholder has its own returns objective, and I think that must be there in the picture as well as we think about it. I think our stance is more in the long run, whereby I think companies must invest responsibly and invest properly in order to protect value and also to be able to generate profitability whilst ensuring that all of the environmental targets are being met. And I think this is why we stand as an investor, whereby we think in the long run where companies should be.
So what I take from that answer is the answer is basically if you have good investment opportunities to improve your ESG, to improve your infrastructure, to future-proof yourself.
Yes.
I think investors will be patient with companies.
Yep.
Because they will see there as a return on investment much later on. That's how I interpret that.
Yep.
That's great. That's encouraging. Kelvin, you've launched our 4P sustainability agenda: patients, public, people, planet. Now, there must be a lot of things that we do in execution and implementation. How do you deploy this in the organization? How does this work? What are the key drivers for that? Or what are the key success factors to make this a success?
I think first and foremost, that strong belief that sustainability is not a sidebar issue, it's not just a reporting or compliance issue, but exactly that I call it making sure that our business, our healthcare business, can remain not just for this generation, but for future generations. We want to make sure that our patients can keep coming back to us because the care that we provide is what they need, right? Is that which is better, faster, easier, but also it needs to be affordable. And again, back to the whole issue that it is a big sustainability issue of our lifetimes. Medical inflation is at a rate that is faster than general inflation. And so therefore, if we see that bigger picture, then the drive or the desire in the company by the leadership and by our people then to make that transformation happen will be true, will be sticky. And I think that's one of the important ways that we make sure we integrate in our business and not just treat it as a reporting or compliance need. I think that's one. Two is we have to lead with investments. We have to lead with investments that disrupt ourselves because of keeping to this same true north that we believe that we are delivering care for good. So I'll give you an example. Our business is bringing patients into hospitals. On the one hand, I have heard analysts ask me, so Dr. Loh, isn't this a conflict? Why don't you have patients stay longer in hospital, do more procedures? That's better for your business, right? I say no. We have to find ways to actually deliver care such that the patients can get out of our hospital faster, or better still, don't have to come to our hospital get that same care, treatment. That's better. That's better for us. I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example why, then I'll tell you why. So one example is we put quite a few $1 million to invest in a liquid biopsy company. Basically, it's a company that can test for cancers just by drawing of the blood, get the diagnosis done. So it avoids the need for patients, say with an X-ray mass in the lung, to have to admit into the hospital, go into the operating theater, have an invasive procedure, go under anesthesia, come out, go into high DU, wait for a couple of days for the pathology result, only to be told that yes, there's lung cancer, and have a hospital bill in the meantime, and have this surgery-induced injury in the lung, right, which you have to recover from. So is it better for the patient? Absolutely. Is it cheaper for the patient? Absolutely. Then you say, oh, but Dr. Loh, you have lost the opportunity of some business. I don't look at it that way. In the end, by making healthcare more effective for patients, they will trust us more, they'll keep coming back to us. That's better for our business. And the second is that in the longer run, it improves our return on equity too, because for the same hospital footprint, I can actually treat many more patients, and they then come into my hospital when they really need to come into the hospital. So the second part is, as to the point, invest where it's logical. In this situation, yeah, we took a couple of percentage points off your dividend to invest in this liquid biopsy company, but because it is a way to transform care, to make it better and more sustainable and also better for the business.
So you are investing real money behind this. This is not just the PowerPoint page and PowerPoint stuff. Right?
Absolutely.
Example, Laguna Merbok is a green hospital.
Yes.
Will we have more green hospitals in our portfolio?
We will. We must. We have stated our objectives around our planet. That carbon net zero target by 2050 is real. We have set it up, we have supported it by interim goals to get to the same carbon baseline by 2025. So we have to go down that conversion journey. Honestly, it's an unnerving target to set, because if you really look at it, the levers that we have today, that is the technologies that's available today in the markets that we are in, to keep bringing down that carbon emission, it's not actually quite there yet. Do I dare say that I have absolute visibility with regards to how can our hospitals get to net zero? Actually, I don't really know. But what I do know is that we can find steps every year. Every year we climb a few steps up in terms of reducing carbon emissions, reducing usage, substituting with alternative energy supplies, and therefore becoming more green. Every year we take a few steps, and then we can see where we have reached, and then subsequent years we take more steps and hopefully there are new technologies that come online. But as a leading healthcare provider, we have to contribute to this. It is a need of the hour. Global warming is not only a crisis, it's a catastrophe that probably will come within our generation, certainly our children's generation. And healthcare itself is, as an industry, I think contributing to about 4 or 5% of the world's carbon emissions. So we'll tackle this head on, and yes, we'll convert our hospitals progressively towards being green.
Great, fantastic. That's fantastic to hear. Ken, we've seen Bursa Malaysia is a leader in advocating good sustainability, disclosures, practices, governance, compliance. And you've started this PLC, publicly listed company, transformation program, and there's a second book that just came out. I think you wrote it together with your team, of course.
Yep.
And it talks a lot about this ESG framework and the rigorous. Can you tell us a little bit more about specific recommendations that you are giving to companies in that book too?
Yeah, York, we normally as an exchange, we operate a disclosure-based regime where all of our PLCs make the disclosures so that the relevant stakeholders can do all of the assessments, and that will be the basis of engagement and decision making. But sometimes as a market, we would love to be or remain competitive with other markets around the region. So the whole point of the PLC transformation program is that rather than disclosures per se, we now move into certain recommendations pertaining to practices. Okay, so the whole point is to enhance the investability of our PLCs. So the attractiveness of Malaysia as a capital market also is enhanced. So the idea, as I've mentioned before, is to come up with a framework for PLCs to make use of in terms of coming up with a robust ESG response, as we call it. So this framework has got a few components, from ESG strategy to initiatives to metrics and targets, stakeholder engagement, and all the infrastructure, people, governance, yes, and reporting. So what we're trying to say is that if you've got all of these ingredients that you're managing effectively, then you overall has got quite a comprehensive response to the ESG challenges that you're facing. So of course, like what Kevin mentioned, there are certain sustainability themes that are absolutely critical, just like climate change. So there are certain directions that we are nudging all of our PLCs. So in the PLC transformation program, Guidebook 2 on ESG, we have got guidelines and we have got tips on how to do GHG baselining. We also make reference, to all of the internationally recognized methodologies like GHG protocol, so that it is in line with international best practices. And in line with all of this, it feeds back to our enhanced disclosure requirements, which is again what Encik Muazzam is looking for, TCFD aligned disclosures. So as you can see, all of the players across the ecosystem, we are converging in terms of expectations. So the Bank Negara's mandating of FIs is also based around that TCFD framework for climate change. So everyone is talking about the same talk, the same narrative, therefore a single set of expectations across the entire market. So this is what we are looking for. So the PLC transformation program is meant to be, again, partially a community of practice, where PLCs help each other and they go on this journey together. And hopefully, they'll be more investable, and as a market, we are more attractive to foreign investors.
Okay, so you define standards, you define common language, sharing of practices.
Yep.
You talk a lot about, or we all talk a lot about the environment, and you said GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint. How about the other two, S and G in ESG, social and governance topics? How about human rights? We don't usually talk a lot about human rights. we don't talk so much about diversity and inclusiveness. You mentioned inclusiveness before. How do you see this as a stock exchange? Is this a secondary target, or how is this?
I think I can mention three things. First one is, of course, everyone is aware, corporate governance as a concept has been around for much longer. So for the exchange, it's pretty easy in the sense that good governance underpins effective sustainability. Without good sustainability governance, you cannot have good practices and policies and all that. So that's why it's the conversation and the narrative in this country is very much underpinned by the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance. So when we talk about sustainability, we're dealing more of the E pillar, environmental, and the S, the social, in ESG. So this is how we see it. Okay?
Human rights in IHH, is that sorry.
The second point I need to make is that we are conscious of the fact that the social pillar is as important as the environmental pillar. So a lot of all of the common themes that we are mandating to all main market PLCs, including IHH, one of the common ones is actually human and labor rights. Okay, so what happens is that when this becomes a mandated material matter, PLCs have to focus attention and efforts to managing it, coming up with the right policies, procedures, initiatives, and performance targets, and so on and so forth. So the spotlight will be on this moving forward. And in terms of diversity, I'm very pleased to say that the exchange has just mandated, a minimum of one woman on every board of all Malaysian PLCs. So come 1st June 2023, all male boards will be a thing of the past in Malaysia. So we are trying to do our parts, across the different, social, themes in that sense.
Is human rights and labor rights, is this an issue for IHH?
The social component or people component is a really big sustainability issue for IHH. I'll tell you why. I've spoken about that demand in healthcare will keep rising. People are getting older. As people get older, probably about 70% of older people have at least one chronic illness. I already mentioned the hospitalization rates increase, and therefore the morbidity or disability then also increases. And of course, what that means is that the ratio of people that are dependent and need to be taken care of either in hospital or having been discharged from hospital to the ratio of caregivers, that's going to rise dramatically. And therefore, the strain on the healthcare workforce that we already see today will only continue to escalate. In the COVID-19 time, I think we saw an acute glimpse of that when you have a big surge in healthcare demand. Burnout amongst healthcare workers is real. The mental stress that they go through is real. Reported cases of actual depression went up during that times of stress. And that same tsunami, while not in the acute form, in a more protracted but still progressively increasing form, that I see as it will increasingly affect our healthcare workforce. And for us, taking care of patients, keeping our business running, serving more patients, means that we do need to find ways to manage this burden and stress on our people better. That's why we have put out very clear targets around our people pillar. We will want to be an employer of choice. What does this mean? We have to take care of issues of inclusiveness, diversity. We have to take care of issues of stress, and putting in tools and processes which enable and support our workforce better, finding ways to automate work and make work less burdensome, right? Healthcare workers today, I tell you, are already going beyond their call of duty. I hear other stories of our nurses, therapists, pharmacists staying way beyond their shift hours, Recently, I read a story of one nurse who was supposed to work 8 hours, but she ended up staying 13 hours. Because they see it as their duty, they see that's what they come to work for, but yet that stress is real, that burden is real, and the relative stress is going to become greater over time, right? So therefore, finding ways to make sure that we provide that environment of work which supports our people the best, given that what I just spoken about, is super important for us, and we see that as a really key sustainability issue, and that's why people is one of our key pillars in the sustainability journey.
Okay, great. We are nearing the end. We have another 10 minutes, so I want to invite you all to ask your questions through the chat box or even here in the audience. Please do. While we are soliciting some of the questions, maybe we go to a final round of some thoughts. And Ken, when you just said one female director, I was just thinking about one of the sayings that we have in my country. It says one pigeon doesn't make a spring. So it's a good start, but I guess we all hope for a lot more than that and have a real equal opportunity participation there. But maybe, Muazzam, when are you stopping investing into brown companies then?
I think overall, our commitment towards sustainability is for the long run. And I think if you look at it into two areas, we will continue to work with our portfolio companies, especially domestically, because out of that 330 billion, I think 60% is invested domestically. And out of that 60%, we have sizable investments in the large corporations in Malaysia. So in the long run, I think we're going to work closely with them, both on the environmental side, social side, and governance side. And I think that commitments will continue. And to touch on, we've talked a lot about the environmental side, social side, issues around labor rights. It's going to be a main topic as well as we talk to our portfolio companies. And on the governance side, as Dr. Ken mentioned, I could not stress that more. We do also believe the importance of governance, having a strong and efficient board and management will ensure that the target set by the company is being pursued properly. So I think those will be the key levers that we will work with going forward as far as our commitment goes. Okay,
very, very good. Ken, what's the next best thing? What's the next big thing in ESG?
I think the next big thing is the question of data, the availability and the robustness of data. I think it's a really big conversation because, especially in the space of climate change, how do we get the right sort of data in the right sort of granularity to enable effective decision making? Because there are lots of corporates, of financial institutions out there who say, "Yup, fantastic, I've got very complex climate scenarios that I should impose on my company in terms of stress testing. But how do I get available data to a level where it can be used for that purpose?" So I think that the next thing that will come will be, again, the expectations that certain data will be supplied by businesses to financial institutions and the rest, and the making available the right source of data that are not yet available. So I think there's a joint committee on climate change that's co-chaired by Bank Negara Malaysia and SC, Securities Commission Malaysia. There is a subcommittee, Subcommittee 5, specifically dealing with all of these data-related challenges. So the other thing is that credibility and also robustness of disclosures. That's why people are talking about greenwashing. And now there is this other piece that's coming in. Have you subjected your sustainability disclosures to an assurance process? Be it an internal review by your internal audit department or an external assurance process. So this is about the credibility and robustness of your disclosures. So that's the other thing that we are expecting. That's why one of Bursa's new enhanced disclosure requirements is the inclusion of a statement of assurance within your sustainability report. So you have to tell us whether your sustainability statement has been subjected to such an assurance process. We understand it is a long game and maybe the ecosystem is not 100% ready. Not just our jurisdiction, but many other jurisdictions around the world. That's why we are now only requiring the saying of whether you have it or not. Have you undertaken? But it will be tightened perhaps in future years to actually require the process to be undertaken. So this is like a socialization phase, if you like.
So moving from self-proclaimed, self-assessed into external assurance processes. I think that's a very interesting theme, and I'm sure this will help increase quality of disclosures as well. We have a couple of questions coming, and maybe, Kelvin, I can invite you to answer the first question. Does IHH plan to align sustainability practices across all your hospitals in different countries? And I may remind, we have 80 hospitals, and we operate in many, many countries.
82 now, actually. So the overall answer is the direction for sustainability practices are the same. The targets that we have set across the group, we have made publicly known. All our subsidiaries and operations will have to contribute towards those targets. Now, the baseline or the situation in different countries of operations are, of course, different stages of evolution. So the initiatives and the projects in any one year may move at a different pace or may implement at different stages in different countries. But overall, the end goals is actually the same, and the practices will be similar in the sense that it ought to achieve the same outcomes eventually.
We're looking for the second question. So basically the answer, the long and short answer to this is yes, but it is a journey, and those that are in more difficult environment may take a bit longer, and some are more advanced, like take some hospitals here in Malaysia that have already advanced quite a bit. Second question, are the different attitudes towards ESG in these countries? If so, how would IHH address that?
I'm not so sure it's different attitudes. I think it's different stages of understanding and development. But once we all see the bigger picture with regards what's good for stakeholders, what's good for the business, then my firm belief is that that change will happen, that leaders across our countries will embrace our journey very strongly, simply because of the fact that, as I've explained, this is not a sidebar project, anyone's sidebar project. This is core and central to our business. It's core and central to our reason for existence, looking after patients better while making sure that we do no harm. When I graduated as a doctor, we were all taught this saying that was always that was enshrined in us. That is to treat often, comfort always, but above all, do no harm. And for all of us in the healthcare provider space, definitely we have to make sure that the system of care they provide does no harm or does less harm to the public, to the planet. And more importantly, I think we now need to go beyond that. The onus is for us now to create an even better system, right? To transform care for the better. We are a global leader in healthcare, and therefore that's our calling. And my firm belief is that our leaders across all markets will see that, embrace that to its fullest.
Great, fantastic. Do no harm and actually do a lot better. I think that's a very good theme. But let me use that maybe as a last question to you, Ken, because it does lead you, when you think about different countries and how do different companies look at sustainability, is there a lot of greenwashing? Is greenwashing a problem? And if it is, then what can you do to help get over this?
I think when you talk about misleading claims, about certain environmental benefits or impacts, this will always be an issue because when you talk about corporate reporting across the different jurisdictions, like what Kevin was saying, there's just different states of readiness. So sometimes is it greenwashing by intent, or is it that the practices itself is still quite poor and requires improvements over time? Just like a lot of sustainability data, some are estimates, then that gets re-estimated in future years, right? When methodologies improve and when practices improve within certain entities. So I think that's why we are always talking now about that assurance process, that extra comfort that you can get, that there's an objective pair of eyes who've looked at all of the disclosures and say, at least something is being done rather than everything in-house. So that's why we're going via the assurance route to say that this is one of not perfect, not by a long mile, but this is something that we could do to address these greenwashing concerns.
Great. Social return on investment is always what I have in mind at the end of such sessions. How can we introduce metrics in a portfolio like yours as a regulator, or maybe as a company like IHH, to say, of course, I have a financial return on investment, but of course, we also have a social return on investment, and to think a little bit around that theme. With this thought, I want to give back time to you. I want to thank everyone for participating in this great panel. This was a great session today. I think there were a couple of very strong messages from the regulator, from our shareholder. And Kelvin, I think this was probably one of the more difficult panels for you because you have the shareholder on one side, you have the regulator on the other side. So kind of sandwiched. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in today. And we'll come back in a couple of months with the next season of Healthcare Insider. Thank you very much.
Thank you.